Seneca once warned, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." We don't live in an age of missing knowledge. We live in an age of drowning in fragmented data. You read more than ever, you listen to podcasts every day, you absorb endless analyses, opinions, and advice. And then a strange paradox appears. The more you know, the harder it becomes to decide. Not because you're unintelligent, not because you lack effort, but because your mind is surrounded by too many scattered pieces of information that were never woven into a whole. Seneca saw this problem long before the modern world. He warned that a mind pulled in too many directions loses its power of judgment. You have data, but you don't have structure. And when information isn't transformed into understanding, the mind doesn't move forward. It just spins in a quiet state of exhaustion. So the problem isn't that you need to know more. The problem is this: you don't yet have a way to turn information into clarity. For the Stoics, intelligence was never measured by how much knowledge you consumed, but by your ability to discern what was worth keeping. Seneca wrote extensively about this. He warned people not to read aimlessly, not to confuse breadth with depth, and then call it wisdom. What he pointed out was subtle and deeply uncomfortable. Many people learn a great deal but understand very little. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they collect information without stopping to identify what matters, compare ideas, or place them into a meaningful structure. When information isn't connected, it doesn't become understanding. It becomes noise, and noise doesn't sharpen the mind, it dulls it. The fatigue people feel today isn't the fatigue of deep thinking. It's the fatigue of thinking without order. In the Stoic view, wisdom isn't knowing everything. It's knowing what deserves your attention and what doesn't. Information synthesis, then, isn't about knowing more. It's about knowing what matters, and just as importantly, knowing what can be ignored. Once it's clear that the problem isn't missing data but missing structure, the next question follows naturally. How do you turn scattered information into understanding solid enough to act on? Seneca believes sound judgment comes from balance, not excess. People who make good decisions rarely rely on a single source. When facing important choices, buying a car, choosing a career, investing, or changing direction, they don't search for the right opinion. They build a picture that's clear enough. They compare objective data. They read opinions while recognizing bias. They listen to experts but never surrender judgment. And most importantly, they test everything against their own lived experience. Not to reach absolute certainty, but to gain enough clarity to take responsibility for the decision. Many people only truly recognize the value of synthesis when they fall into a familiar state, learning a lot, but acting very little. Not because they're lazy, but because they no longer know what to trust. Conflicting information, overlapping viewpoints, a mind pulled in too many directions at once. Seneca would have called this a scattered life, busy, informed, yet inwardly disordered. Only when people begin to summarize, connect, and deliberately remove excess does clarity return. And when clarity appears, decisions begin to feel lighter. To practice this with discipline, use a simple thinking loop, one very much aligned with Stoic principles. First, survey the landscape. See the whole problem before diving into details. Next, define the core question. Not how much information is there, but what do I actually need to understand in order to decide? Then collect selectively. Read and listen only to what directly serves that question. Then comes the most important step. Summarize everything in your own words. If you can't explain it clearly, you don't truly understand it yet. Finally, test and adjust. Act on what you understand. Observe the outcome. Refine your perspective. Understanding isn't fixed. It matures through use. Today's application is simple. Choose one decision you've been delaying because you feel overwhelmed. Don't look for new sources. Write down the 3 main sources shaping your thinking. Briefly note the strength and the bias of each one. Then summarize the decision in 5 lines of your own words. If you can't summarize it, the problem isn't missing information. You haven't finished synthesizing. Seneca believed calmness doesn't come from a life without difficulty, but from order within the mind. In a world that never stops making noise, wisdom no longer lies in consuming more. It lies in the ability to keep what matters and let the rest pass. Calm people aren't calm because they read more than others. They're calm because they filter noise, connect ideas, and act only when the picture is clear. Information synthesis doesn't turn you into an expert. It turns you into someone who governs their own thinking, not pulled by opinions, not paralyzed by contradictions, not collecting more data just to delay a decision. When clarity appears, action doesn't need to be forced. It happens naturally, because at that point you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. In the next video, we'll explore a delicate boundary, the difference between synthesizing information and rationalizing existing beliefs. Because not every summary leads to wisdom.